What's up, everybody? Let's Talk Jets Radio. Hope you guys are doing well. Quick reminder, we'll be back live tonight, 8 o'clock, bringing people on. So if there's any topics you want us to get into, feel free to hop on, join the chat. This video is going to talk about the games this weekend and kind of how it relates to the Jets in their rebuild and just how close or far away they might be to actually flipping this thing around. And I've seen so many differing opinions. On one hand, it almost feels like the Jets are so far away compared to where these other teams are at. You know, you look at the Bengals and the step that Joe Burrow took in year 2. You look at the way Herbert's playing. You know, even in his rookie year, he was playing pretty well. I thought he played even better in year 2, although the team around him, I guess, could still use some work. They kind of choked towards the end. And obviously, Pat Mahomes, he's not going anywhere. Josh Allen, he's not going anywhere. And those two teams are set up pretty well, I think, to dominate for at least the next 4 to 5 years. Obviously, you want to see how the Bills are going to respond if they end up losing Dable. But the AFC just seems like it's loaded. And, we didn't even factor in all the coaches as far as Belichick, Tomlin, Harbaugh. I don't think these guys are going anywhere anytime soon. So, for a fact, in all likelihood, that you're not going to have, a top 2 or 3 coach in the AFC. As much as some of us like Saleh, even if he shows major progress in year 2, chances are highly likely that he's not going to be at the level of those guys that have been here, for 10 plus years, winning division titles, going to playoffs almost every single year. So then you look at the quarterbacks as kind of the other path, and I think this is actually the easier path, is where you have the dominant quarterback who can kind of carry you there. And I think it's much easier for a mediocre or average or an even good head coach to win with a great quarterback, more so than it is a great head coach to win with the average quarterback. You're going to have some examples, obviously, like, the Niners. They're getting by with Garoppolo, although a lot of those wins, you could look at special teams, you could look at defense, you could look at coaching, and give just as much credit, if not even more credit, to those areas as opposed to the quarterback. But more often than not, if you have the dominant quarterback, he can kind of get you over the hump if you don't have elite coaching. And so the big question, I think, as it relates to the Jets and their rebuild and how long this is going to take, what is Zach Wilson and how quickly can we get him to where, these other elite quarterbacks are playing? And, Josh Allen, he wasn't an MVP candidate in year 2. That wasn't until year 3, but his year 2 was still pretty damn good. He took a sizable jump from year 1 to year 2. Of course, I just mentioned Burrow and Herbert. The way those two played in year 2 was just out of their minds. Almost looking like the new face of football going forward as Rodgers and Breeze and all these other guys, Brady, start to phase out a little bit. So I start to think, like, where are the Jets? Can they, if Zach Wilson's legitimate, if he's that superstar quarterback, can they get to where the Bengals are this year? Are they a year or 2 away from maybe being in the same position that the Bills are in? Since they started to retool with McDermott and, they got Allen, they made the trade for an elite receiver and Stephon Diggs. So what is it going to take for the Jets to ultimately kind of expedite this rebuild and start to move it a little bit faster? I think that's the big question that everyone's thinking about. And like I was saying, there's 1 or 2 ways to look at it. You can look at it from the standpoint of where everybody else is right now, talent-wise, and what they've already accomplished, and say, all right, the Jets have a lot of catching up to do. They've got a lot of holes to fill before we can really even talk about, playoffs and making a legitimate run. Or you could, choose to look at it from the other side and say, you know what, last year the Bengals, they were sitting there, number 1 overall pick, or 2 years ago before they took Burrow. They were sitting there, number 1 overall pick. There weren't many people at all that were saying, this team's probably a year or 2 away from turning it around. But you get your quarterback, you get him a number 1 wide receiver, and you have pretty good coaching, and suddenly things change pretty quick. So there's a big part of me that's feeling a little bit more optimistic that, yes, there are some powerhouses in the AFC right now, and there's a lot of young quarterbacks that are playing well, but there are examples of rebuilds getting turned around very, very quickly if you add the right pieces, and in particular, if your quarterback is playing at an elite level. So I think much of this kind of hinges on what we see from Zach Wilson in year 2. If he takes that major leap, then I think there's a very good chance that the Jets are not only playing competitive football in December, but they could legitimately be in the playoff conversation next year. They could be not just in the hunt, but they might actually get a wild card seed. Now, again, it's not just on Zach. You obviously need to find him some more help, including a tight end, possibly that number 1 wideout. who knows if all that could be addressed this year. And you're going to have some other guys that you're going to need to rely on that are coming back, like Becton, like Corey Davis. You could throw Carl Lawson on the defensive side in there as well. So there's still a lot of ifs. There's a lot of question marks. But they do have a good amount of resources as far as cap goes, and all the draft picks that they have, 4 picks in the top 40. I believe it's 9 overall picks within the first 5 rounds. There are a lot of resources to use to kind of jumpstart this thing forward a little bit. So yes, Joe Douglas needs to hit. That's an obvious, but Zach Wilson also needs to take the step. You got to surround him with more help and put him in position to do that. And I think tight end is probably the biggest thing you need. Another weapon, another number 1 wideout, I think could really help as well. Solidify that offensive line a little bit more. But even a guy like Burrow in the playoffs gets sacked 9 times, still finds a way to get it done at the end and win the game. So even without that elite offensive line, I think the Jets offense should be a little bit better next year. It's another year for everybody in the system, so a little bit more continuity, a little more familiarity with everybody. So I'm going back and forth. I don't have the right answer. The realist in me says that just compared to everybody else right now, this is still going to take another year or two. I want to be hopeful. I want to be optimistic that if everything goes right, yes, the Jets could win next year, or at least, like I said, compete for a playoff spot. But the realist in me keeps kind of going back to the fact that, unfortunately, the draft takes place after free agency, which is why I don't feel like there's going to be this crazy spending spree. Douglas might feel a little bit of pressure, but I don't think he's going to go all out to get certain guys. I think he's going to have a list of maybe 4 or 5 top premium free agents that he's going to want to go after. If they want to come to the Jets, so be it. If they're not willing to come here, even if the Jets offer top dollar, I don't know if Douglas is just going to recklessly start spending that money. I think he's going to want to get through the draft. He's going to want to see which players fall, which players don't, and ultimately, have a full season where you can evaluate not just this draft class, but last year's, and even his first draft class, and see if any of those guys could actually turn things around. Guys like Mims, guys like P. Ryan, Ashton Davis, are they any part of your future at all? Can Mekhi Becton stay on the field? All these things we got to get answers to. And ultimately, if you keep that cap flexibility and you get all these answers and they're good answers and guys that you can depend on going forward, that makes life a lot easier going into next year, where you're going to have all that cap flexibility. Maybe you're more of an attractive destination for free agents. They see that you're on the cusp of making the playoffs, or maybe you actually made it. There's good locker room vibes. Players are buying into Saleh. You have people talking. I think things can change a little bit more at the end of this upcoming season, as opposed to where they're at right now, where maybe you do have to overpay to try to bring in a player that might not even be the best fit, but you feel that pressure to try to add talent and to try to turn things around. So I don't think Joe Douglas is going to have that panic mindset, but I do think he's going to be willing to be aggressive for the right pieces if they identify it as a right fit. So see what happens. Talk to you guys tonight. Hope everyone's well. Have a good night.